I want to hear cannons. Downfield, pull up, ball to the 5, touchdown Tampa Bay. Mike Evans does it again. Fire the cannons, Bucs.
It's first and goal. That's picked off. That's picked off. And who else? Rondé Barber. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers may ride to the Super Bowl with that one.
Third down, 18. Dropping Gannon, looking Gannon. Those up with the head. Intercepted. At the 40. Derek Brooks 30. Brooks to the 25, 20. Derek Brooks all the way. There it is. The dagger's in. We're going to win the Super Bowl. And then the cannons come. Fire them. Keep on firing them. Keep on firing them.
Hello and welcome back, Bucs fans, to a brand new edition of the Cannon Fire Podcast live on YouTube today. I am your host, Rhett Matthew, joined alongside me, my good buddy and co-host from BucsNation.com, Evan Wanish. Joining us on the show today, the second of two shows we are doing in collaboration with the Falcoholic and the Dirty Birds and Brew podcast. Kevin Knight back on the show to help us preview Week 8's NFC South matchup between two teams who desperately need a win to keep momentum going in their season. The Bucs and the Falcons will square off Sunday. Kevin, welcome back to the show. Long time no see, my friend.
Yeah, we definitely didn't just talk yesterday. This is completely, off the cuff. We haven't had any talks whatsoever. No, happy to be back on because this is one of the spicier matchups, I think, of the whole week and can really be a pivotal moment for this division this year. I mean, it feels like a turning point. So,
Evan, as emotional as we have gotten about the Monday Night Football game this week, ultimately the only thing the Bucs can do right now is just move on and look ahead to Sunday. It's obviously a much more important game, and it's going to have many more implications on how the rest of their season is going to play out, especially the playoff hunt, that division race for an NFC South division that between Atlanta and Tampa Bay has been competitive up until this point. But it's an interesting matchup for the Bucs, right? I mean, you're obviously going into this shorthanded. You don't have Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. So to say they have to get creative is a little bit of an understatement here. But we're certainly going to see what they are made of in terms of playing a complete game here against an opponent that got the better of them last time.
We definitely are. And it was a game that, last time in week 5, these two teams met. Look, the Bucs probably should have won that football game, right? The Bucs really blew that game. And, okay, you can talk about a missed call or whatever here or there. Look, you got the ball. You have the lead with a couple minutes left. Kirk Cousins throws the interception late in that game. And then you get put out of field goal range. You can't kick a field goal, and your defense is sort of crumbles. You had that game in your hands, and you just let it slip. So the Buccaneers now are in a position where, okay, I think – it wasn't like they were expected to beat Baltimore, right? It's not like they were like, oh, well, man, that was so unexpected. They lost to Baltimore and now they got Atlanta. But I mean, they were expected to come out of Baltimore with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, still playing in this matchup. And there was a few people, and I didn't necessarily agree with it, but there was a few people before the Baltimore game, leading up to it, that thought maybe the Bucs should have sat Mike Evans. Even before the game had even started, you even saw what happened. They thought maybe they should have sat Mike Evans in preparation for this game because this game is massive. And we had a similar matchup last year, late in the season, in Atlanta for the Bucs and Falcons, where it was a pivotal game. Whoever won that game was probably going to win the division. The Bucs were able to win that game, and they went on to win the NFC South for the third straight season. Now they're trying to do it with fourth straight time. Don't believe they've ever done that in franchise history. So they're trying to do it a first time. It's not going to be easy. And I mean, this game to me is one of the most important Bucs games, I think, since maybe Tom Brady was here, because I can't see a world where the Buccaneers lose this football game and still win the NFC South. I can't see a world where the Falcons sweep the Bucs, but the Bucs are still able to. I mean, barring a collapse from the Falcons or the Bucs really rising to the occasion and going on a ridiculous run, I can't see a world where the Falcons sweep the Bucs, but the Bucs still win the South. So this game is if the Bucs want any shot, right? The tough thing. The Bucs can't win the division by winning this game, but they can certainly lose the division by losing it. And that's the tough scenario that Tampa Bay's find themselves in. And now you're going to have to do it without the two best offensive weapons you have. So it's going to be an uphill battle.
Both of these teams come in here with a 4-3 record, but Kevin, Atlanta's 4-3 is a much different feeling 4-3. It took a couple of games for Kirk Cousins to kind of get used to the offense and get up to speed. You said earlier this week that that big time game against Tampa Bay a few weeks ago was almost like a coming out party for the most successful version of this Falcons offense so far this season. So, what does this matchup mean for them to try and get to 5-3, to try and regain or kind of buckle down on control of the NFC South division? The Bucs trying to stay alive and save their division hopes here, but Atlanta kind of more so in the driver's seat.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obviously critical in terms of the standings. If Atlanta could sweep here, that would give them a huge advantage going forward. And you look at the schedule, like Tampa Bay is going to have to survive this gauntlet that they're going through right now, which is already Baltimore was a really tough test. We're talking about one of the best teams in the NFL. Atlanta, not one of the best teams in the NFL right now, but certainly one of those teams that can beat pretty much anyone. I mean, we've seen them take the Chiefs down to the wire. So, and then you got San Francisco and Kansas City. So it's like this game is kind of the must win of that bunch where you're like, at least if you could win this one, keep yourself from getting swept by the Falcons. There's a little bit of hope left that even if you were to scuffle over the next few weeks, that you could still kind of finish strong, because I know the Bucs schedule, just like the Falcons, kind of softens up in the second half. So it's critical for Atlanta too that they could build a little bit of a gap here going into a couple of tougher games. But I think it's really, like you said, the Atlanta's offense, especially early in the year, very inconsistent. The passing game non-existent for the first week, and every week it's kind of come together more. Last week was kind of a step in the wrong direction, but yardage, I mean, on the field they look basically the same. Just Kirk Cousins decided he was going to try to play hero ball down 10 and just try to unleash the dragon, and maybe just dial back the dragon a little bit. They didn't really need to panic down 10 to the Seahawks. The defense ended up playing better in that second half. If they don't turn the ball over, who knows? But the one thing that I would say has changed since these two teams played is Atlanta has kind of figured out their run game issues, which when Falcons played the Bucs, they were starting to get it together, but outside of the first 2 weeks, they had kind of gone back to very outside zone heavy, and everyone was kind of like, oh, we played this last year, we know what to do against this. And they've gotten a lot more creative with it. Bijan Robinson arguably had his best game of his career last week against Seattle. So Atlanta's kind of continuing to figure stuff out on offense and get, I think, more and more dangerous if Kirk can, keep it down just a little bit in terms of the aggressiveness. But really, it's the defense for Atlanta that hasn't really changed at all. And I think teams are starting to lock onto their tendencies and take advantage.
Diving into the matchup a little bit more, Evan, today Todd Bowles spoke to the media, and he confirmed that obviously Mike Evans not going to play, but defensive tackle Greg Gaines and cornerback Tyke Smith on concussion protocol are all going to be out versus the Falcons. He did confirm that Bucky Irving is going to play. Now, this is an interesting storyline, obviously, because the Buccaneers' run game has become a huge storyline this week. A lot of people fully expect them to be able to lean on this now that we've seen Rachaad White, Sean Tucker, and Bucky Irving all kind of come into their own so far this season. Bucky Irving, his status up in the air, expecting more snaps for Sean Tucker. Rachaad White here back healthy in the lineup. But when you look at this matchup here, the Bucs are obviously down their top two weapons in Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Liam Cohen going to have to get creative with the playbook in a sense. How do you feel about this matchup, and can they lean on the run game this week?
They're going to have to find a way, right? I think you're going to have to. I'm interested to see, because I want to say at the same time, the pass game is their strength, but I don't know that anymore, right? Like I don't know. I think they could have gotten by, and you still could have said, oh, the passing game is a strength had Chris Godwin not gone down, okay? Because I think you would have said, okay, not perfect that you have Evans out for a couple of weeks, but Godwin's enough, and McMillan and Palmer and Sterling Shepard and stuff, like there'll be enough, right? There's enough there to get by. But with both of them down, you're going to have to rely on the run game a little bit more. So I just don't know if the passing game is going to be a strength. There's just so much uncertainty there. And I do think the Bucs will, but also I think they can't be afraid to abandon it if need be. And that may be how the game going, right? That may dictate that, right? The Bucs are down 10-0 like that. okay, your game plan probably has to change. If you want to run the ball 25 times, you probably can't do that when you're down, multiple scores early. But I do think they're going to see a lot of Rashad White. Bucky Irving, we'll see if he is expected to play. We'll see if he's on like a snap count. We'll see if he's limited in any way. Sean Tucker is another guy. And like I said, I thought the most encouraging thing after a Monday night game that in retrospect, if the Bucs end up, not finishing the season well, right? And they miss the playoffs or whatever happens. I think you're going to be looking back on that Monday night game as sort of like the turning point. But one of the more encouraging things I thought from Monday night was the Buccaneers run game against a stout Ravens run defense. So I do think that the run game has shown some positive signs, and the Bucs are going to need that on Sunday because they can't go out there and have Baker Mayfield throw the ball 45 times and expect to put up the amount of points that they have in the first couple of weeks. It's just not realistic without those two guys in Evans and Godwin.
Yeah, you can't ask these wide receivers to do the same things you can ask Mike Evans or Chris Godwin to do. It doesn't work out that way. Jalen McMillan, he's good at getting open, but he's not good at making those gritty catches, those contested catches that Chris Godwin is able to reel in. Those the dirty work out of the slot. There's a lot left to be desired, I think, with the receiving room they have left when you talk about filling that role. So replacing those guys is obviously going to be tough, but I think it is a huge week for the run game. And I think another big matchup we're going to be looking at here on this Buccaneers offense, Kevin, wanted to get your thoughts on the trenches because the Bucs offensive line, quite frankly, they've been criticized a little bit so far this season. Early on, the first few weeks of the season, there was a lot of talk about the interior offensive line. But man, Graham Barton, Cody Mauch, and that entire offensive line against Baltimore, they were moving people around, and they were a huge reason the run game was as successful as it was against the NFL's number one rush defense. But Kevin, when you look at this matchup here, the trenches for the Falcons, do you think there is a mismatch for this run game at all? Do you think there is an opportunity for the Buccaneers to, kind of keep the Falcons honest here to start the game, come out aggressive, try and control the clock, and maybe have some success?
Yeah, I mean, the Falcons haven't really stopped the run well. Last year they were one of the best run defenses in the NFL. They have not been that this year. They're, it's funny, like they give up a lot of yards, but if you actually look at the stats, they're 10th in yards per carry, which doesn't seem to make sense. But they're okay. I don't think they're very good in particular. But last week against the Seahawks, that was actually Atlanta's best day against the run all season. They limited Seattle to just 103 rushing yards when they had a huge lead in the second half. And basically that was part of the reason that Atlanta even kept that game alive as long as they did, is Seattle wanted to pound it out and close it, and they wouldn't really let them. But I do think Atlanta's defense, even though they've started to get a little bit better in that regard, is still not particularly good against the run. Now, one thing to watch is I think their three linebackers are kind of the key pieces to what they want to do. I think they really want Caden Ellis to play edge, but they had Nate Landman get hurt, and then that meant that Caden Ellis had to go back to playing off ball, where he's not played well this year. And then Troy Anderson got hurt against the Saints playing special teams, which, speaking of dumb injury decisions, we could, throw that one into the pot. But both Anderson and Landman should be back this week. Landman's been playing for a couple weeks. That may allow Atlanta to finally get Anderson back there, who was looking like maybe their best linebacker against the Saints. Finally, we're getting some returns on that pick after he ended up missing all of last season with an injury. And if Ellis can play the edge, he's been very, very efficient when he's gotten to play there. Last week, played 8 snaps on the edge, just kind of rotating down, had 4 pressures on 8 snaps. So, the Falcons don't really have anybody getting pressure on the edge other than Arnold Ebiketie. So, I think they would like to be able to move their linebackers around and do some different things. And that could be something that maybe changes their fortunes in that regard. But, the defensive line as a whole is just kind of disappointed, especially the interior, where Atlanta was really hoping that would be the kind of glue that held the whole thing together. And I think Grady Jarrett in particular has started to kind of round back into form. He missed most of last season with an injury, so last week was his best game. David Onyemata is getting a little bit, hotter as well, but just not as dominant as they were at times last year. And I think that against the Bucs interior, which, like you said, has been a huge improvement from last year in particular. Particularly Mauk, who struggled as a rookie. That could be one of the key matchups of this game for sure.
And I think it's interesting, when you're talking about the Falcons, their run defense, and because the Buccaneers are they're gonna have to come up with different ways to score now, right? They're gonna have to come up with different ways to move the ball, and I think this is a decent matchup for them, especially just starting out, right? Because eventually, like, you are gonna be able to figure some things out. The more you go on without Chris Godwin, you're gonna be able to figure out, okay, this is how the offense is gonna have to go. Okay, this works, this doesn't. This used to work with Chris Godwin. It doesn't work with Jalen McMillan. Okay, we have to change that. I think this matchup for the Buccaneers, being the first time being without Godwin and Evans all year, I think it favors them a little bit. The Falcons, I Bleav, are 24th in the NFL in total rush yards allowed per game. It is 137 yards allowed per game. The Buccaneers are only slightly better than that. I think the Buccaneers are like 21st or 20th in the NFL allowed. So I think both teams could maybe run the ball, even though last time these two teams played, Kirk Cousins threw the ball all over the lot. I still think the Falcons are going to want to air it out, but I just don't know if the Buccaneers are going to want to be throwing the ball 30 plus, 35 plus times, unless they absolutely have to, just because I still think there's a lot of work in progress there with guys like McMillan and Palmer, and Sterling Shepard is a veteran, but he sort of is what he is at this point. So I do think you're going to see a pretty healthy dose of Rachaad White in this one.
Evan, wanted to get your thoughts. How much do you trust these pass catchers this week? Because, again, we talked about getting creative, finding new ways to score. We know the running backs can get involved. Rachaad White, when he is healthy, can find the end zone out of the backfield. He can pick up, 15 yards out of a screen pass on 2nd and 6. He can do what needs to be done. But looking more so at what they have left in Sterling Shepard, Jalen McMillan, Trey Palmer, obviously back in the lineup. Raheem Jarrett, I don't know if he's officially been activated, but expected to be activated.
I am not. It's soon. I'm not sure if it's this week or not, but soon.
Yeah, he should be back in the lineup soon. But really, we're talking about Sterling Shepard, Trey Palmer, and Jalen McMillan. Jalen McMillan first, I want to get your thoughts on, because we remember how exciting he was in training camp, all the hype, especially after that big-time play over the top against Washington week 1. And then kind of fell off after that. They've gotten creative with their usage, but we really haven't seen a ton of them. I think at times he's been overshadowed by Trey Palmer, and he's definitely been overshadowed by Sterling Shepard, who they're going to lean on here. But I think this game is a good chance for Jalen McMillan to start getting some more looks here and try and turn around the impression a lot of people have of his rookie season so far. But your thoughts on what they have?
I still like McMillan. The slower start hasn't really deterred my Bleav in him, especially long term. I still think long term he's going to be a pretty good football player. Of course, though, right? If you're expecting him to be Chris Godwin, and if you're somebody listening to this and you're expecting that, you're setting yourself up. You're setting yourself up for disappointment. That's just what you're doing, because it's Chris Godwin's impossible to replace, especially the particular role that Godwin played in this offense. So I don't expect Chris Godwin or Jim McMillan to be Chris Godwin 2.0 on Sunday. But I still think McMillan can go out there and make some plays for this team. And look, he's going to have to. I mean, somebody's going to have to if they want to win. Because if they don't, then they're simply not going to win the game. McMillan even talked about that a little bit, says, he's, a bit more confident in his ability now. I think, as a rookie entering the NFL, you're a little bit shy, timid, a little bit like you're walking on eggshells a bit. The more you play, the more comfortable you get. And I think he's experienced that now. So it's much better, than starting week 1 is you're basically the number 1 or number 2 wide receiver. Now he gets to ease himself in a little bit. They're going to need him, though. I'm interested to see how they use guys like Trey Palmer and Sterling Shepard. Trey Palmer obviously had a pretty good year last year, has been decent this year when he's been called upon, had that injury. I Bleav it was the concussion, and he was out for, I think, the Saints game. But so, I mean, he was, and the Falcons, I think the last Falcons game, he was also out for too. So he missed that game because he had the concussion in the Philly game. So, I think I'm interested to see how they use Palmer. As far as trust, I trust Liam Cohen. That's what I'll say. I don't know if I can trust any of these receivers 100% yet until I see it. but I trust Liam Cohen to be able to put them in positions to make plays. But again, as we always talk about, like whether you like Todd Bowles' defensive scheme or not, and we'll talk about the defense in a little bit here, but whether you like that or not, it's on the players to execute, right? Like Liam Cohen can scheme up things all they want. It's on these players to execute, though. And I do trust him enough to scheme things open for them. Now, whether they do it or not, that is, we'll get our answers on that, this Sunday, because, again, they're going to need at least one of these three to step up if they want a chance.
Absolutely. Someone's going to have to step up, and it'll be interesting to see. Kevin, when you look at that secondary for the Falcons, there is a decent amount of talent. Don't get us wrong. Jesse Bates, one of the best safeties in football. A.J. Terrell has kind of been a name the Bucs are familiar with at this point. Justin Simmons as well. But are there any matchups in particular that you kind of favor the Falcons this week? Because, again, I think the Bucs coming into this a little bit shorthanded when you don't have Mike Evans, you don't have Chris Godwin. I think for the Bucs, it's going to take a game or two to figure out if it's worth trying to get this pass game as aggressive as it has been, because, Sterling Shepard, Jalen McMillan, these are guys that are averaging maybe 3 to 5 targets a game. It's going to take a little bit to determine if it's worth giving them 8 to 9, maybe 10 targets a game, especially when you have to lean on them in the pass game a little bit. But any matchups you like this week, Kevin, or anything you're paying extra close attention to?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Falcons are going to feel very confident in their corners against these receivers. I think we're likely to see Justin Simmons come down in the box more. I think he wants to do that. They would love to have him just play robber down there more. They've played a ton of too high safety looks, and I think Simmons is still capable of that, but he's lost a little bit of a step from his prime years, and he doesn't have the elite range anymore. Jesse Bates obviously does. So, I'm sure they'll try to leave Bates back and maybe bring Simmons up a little bit more, see if he can grab some of those interceptions over the middle that he's so famous for. But I think Atlanta's not really going to fear the passing game. Maybe dedicate some extra attention to Cade Otton. We know he's one of Baker's favorite targets. Even with, Evans and Godwin out there, Baker was really starting to trust Cade Otton, Senior Bowl hero Cade Otton. Loved watching him in Mobile, so know what he can do. But I think Atlanta is going to assume that Tampa Bay is going to try to run the ball, and they're going to adjust accordingly. And I think they trust Mike Hughes is probably his best corner, funny enough. I'm sure they trust Hughes to handle his guy, D. Alford in the slot. And then, Terrell, I feel like, they're going to trust those three guys going up against these, reserve receivers. And we'll have to see how that goes and what that trust looks like. Do they let them play single coverage? Do they bring the safeties down? I think Atlanta's going to be trying to adjust to what's likely to be at least an opening run heavy game script from the Bucs.
Yeah, and it's really quick. I just wanted to, so the difference, right, in what the Bucs have lost versus what they're going to be rolling out there on Sunday. So Chris Godwin and Mike Evans have combined for 76 catches so far on the season. 76 catches. Chris Godwin, 50 catches already. So a massive loss to the offense. Mike Evans, 26 catches. They combined for 76 catches and 911 yards, as well as 11 touchdowns. Jalen McMillan, Sterling Shepard, and Trey Palmer have combined for 19 catches. 19 catches. So Mike Evans alone has more catches than all three of those guys combined. And also they are, I Bleav it is 228 total receiving yards between the three players and just, I Bleav 3 touchdowns. So you're going to be missing a lot. And that's what the Buccaneers are going to be rolling with. Now, like you said, Kevin, Cade Otton's on that list right now. Of course, Mike Evans left the game early. Cade Otton remained in the game, caught 8 passes. But Cade Otton right now has more catches than Mike Evans. He has 1 more catch than Evans does. So I would expect them to rely on Cade Otton. Rachaad White has 23 catches on the year. I would expect them to rely on him as well in the passing game. So there's other ways. I just wanted to point that out to illustrate just how much of this offense is not going to be out there on Sunday. And Mike Evans is coming back at some point this season, but Chris Godwin ain't. Like that's a massive loss for this team. So I'm very curious to see how this offense basically performs. And right now it's tough to get a read on it because you just simply don't know.
And I guess this puts into context the overall success that Liam Cohen's offense has had. The production of Chris Godwin speaks for itself, but those numbers you just mentioned, Evan, a lot of people were saying that was a slow start for Mike Evans. Like, there were people debating on if he was going to get his 1,000 yards. I mean, the argument now more hot than ever. But a lot of people were debating it because he's averaging 50, 60 yards per game, but he's taking up a huge percentage of the targets and the catches, as you had mentioned. And we've said it a bunch of times, but both of them were also leading the NFL in touchdowns headed into that Monday Night Football game.
And the attention, right?
Yep.
The attention they bring. Just like Kevin said, Atlanta's corners now don't have to be as worried, right? I mean, look, if the Bucs come out throwing and Atlanta's not prepared for it and the Bucs get a few big plays, okay, then they'll worry about it. But right now, coming into this game, I'm sure the Falcons are probably betting that the Bucs are gonna want to run the ball. So why would you worry about a Jalen McMillan, Trey Palmer, Sterling Shepard until they actually prove that they will beat you? And that's what the Buccaneers had to prove on Sunday.
Yeah, I think as far as the Buccaneers offense, they're going to try and come out early. They're going to keep the Falcons honest in the run game. I think they know that they have 3 functioning running backs. Bucky Irving, again, his stat is still kind of in question. Curious to see how many carries he's going to wind up with, but an interesting note here as well. Sean Tucker had a really good night on Monday, but he only got 5 carries, and you wouldn't think he got 5 carries. But he's had a really high yards per carry between that and the Saints game. I think he's done more than enough now to earn some more snaps. So I would not be surprised if he comes away with this one with more carries than a Bucky Irving. But you just got to wait and see. I definitely think it is going to be a run-heavy script for the Buccaneers in the beginning of this one to try and establish what they can do on offense for the rest of the game. Let's talk about the other side of the football here for both teams. The Buccaneers defense versus the Falcons offense. Last time they played Kirko Cousins, man, he was setting records, basically. It was 500-plus yards of total offense on the day for Big Kirko through the air. And, the Bucs defense hasn't changed a ton. I mean, maybe you got a little bit healthier in the trenches, but with Lamar Jackson...
They also got Winfield back. Winfield was not in that game versus Atlanta the first time. But, again, we just saw Lamar Jackson throw all over him, too. So.
Right. If the pass rush, if the defensive line cannot put pressure on Kirk Cousins... I don't know if this defense has convinced me that very much is going to change in this matchup in particular here, Evan.
No, and look, it's to me, the Falcons are going to do what they did last time. I think they're going to attack the middle of the field, and I think it's going to be up to these Buccaneers pass rushers. They have to find a way. And I understand some people were pleased with the Buccaneers, like pass rush performance or whatever on Thursday night against Atlanta in the first one. I think the Bucs had a couple sacks, but Cousins threw the ball 58 times. Like, yeah, if you throw the ball that much, I'm sure the Falcons probably don't even want Kirk Cousins to throw the ball that much again, right? And they go into overtime and stuff, had something to do with that and everything. But I mean, when you throw the ball that much, yeah, like you're bound to get more sacks when the dude's throwing it almost 60 times. So yeah, the Bucs pass rush is going to have to come to the occasion here. They're going to have to find a way to get more consistent pressure. Kirk Cousins is not Lamar Jackson, right? He can he can't escape the pocket like Lamar can. And I thought they did a decent job of getting pressure on Lamar, but again, Lamar was able to escape some pockets and make some plays with his feet. Cousins, I mean, he's not an absolute statue back there, but he's obviously not going to do what Lamar Jackson did on Monday night with his legs. So I think you have to find a way to get consistent pressure. If you can't, it might not look exactly like it did on that Thursday night game, but it's going to look pretty darn close. Because I don't have much faith in the middle of the field right now of this team defending it. Jamel Dean's still out for this game, so Tyreek Thunderberg will be in. Tyke Smith, out. Has been a really good nickel corner for them. I don't see how the secondary is going to be able to slow down Atlanta's pass catchers if they can't get pressure on Kirk Cousins.
Kevin, your thoughts on Kirk Cousins so far? Again, took a couple of weeks for that Falcons offense to get going, but, Kirk Cousins is the veteran that they paid for at this point, right? He's able to take your offense to another level, and he's able to consistently put up these numbers and kind of keep this offense in a lot of their ball games so far.
Yeah. No, I mean, Kirk has been what we expected. I think that as is typical for when you get a new quarterback in, like there's been some scuffles we had that very weird week 1 game where they played entirely out of the pistol and ran 0 play action. Very odd, So, but other than that, I mean, he's basically been what you would expect. He did have a down game last week, but when he's been hot, he's been really good. I mean, it's such an upgrade over what we've seen in Atlanta basically the past 2 to 3 seasons. And you look at it, it's basically trickled down to the rest of the roster. I mean, Kyle Pitts third in the NFL among tight ends now. And that's really with him just having 3 good games now. That's kind of the state of tight end at this point. But Drake London, I think he's leading the NFL in like receiver DVOA or something like that. When he finally gets a competent quarterback, it's amazing what can happen. And yeah, I mean, Darnell Mooney looks like legit. I know people were questioning whether he was, actually good after his one good season with the Bears. But again, you get these guys good quarterback play and they start to look a lot different. So yeah, I mean, I think Kirk Cousins just needs to play under control a little bit more, get back to, being willing to throw the ball away, not feeling like he needs to go out and play hero ball. And Falcons can help him out by not getting in a big hole. The defense can play well, that sort of thing. But he's definitely been worth every penny at this point. And I think that he's going to be one of the main reasons that if they do end up winning the division this year, I think they'll point to like, wow, we just needed to get a quarterback in here and this team can do it.
Oh, and I remember from that game in Atlanta last year. I mean, look, the Bucs won that game, but I mean, me and Rhett said it time and time again, like, if Desmond Ritter's not the quarterback, the Bucs probably lose. Like Desmond Ritter, I remember, was just brutal in that game. Threw a bad interception to Carlton Davis, missed a bunch of dudes. And the Bucs won a close game. So yeah, just like you said, the thought would be if you upgrade the quarterback position that, all right, well, it's a close division race. You upgrade a big spot there, and man, all right. You're probably going to win this thing. And I think it showed on that Thursday night game, right? Desmond Ritter doesn't win that game. Like if Desmond Ritter's in, the Falcons lose that game possibly by multiple scores, right? I mean, because Desmond Ritter's just not doing that with the way the Falcons defense wasn't able to keep up in the first half. Desmond Ritter, I don't think was pulling them out of that. A veteran quarterback like Kirk Cousins, especially when you don't get pressure on him and you're playing a zone heavy scheme, they're just going to pick you apart. And that's exactly what Kirk Cousins did. And the Bucs are going to have to find some different answers. Do I expect Kirk Cousins to throw for over 500 yards again? No. But I still think he could have a good amount of success through the air on Sunday. Again, if the Bucs don't tighten a lot of things up.
I said it on Thursday's show with Kevin, and this is a big game for Todd Bowles. I wouldn't go as far to say he's walking on eggshells here, but he's getting close, right? When you've got a defense that's declining, I mean, there's really no other term for it. When you've got a defense that's getting worse over time under a defensive-minded head coach, it's never a good look for him. Evan, you would probably agree with me that a lot of the Buccaneers' losses this year, all 3 of them, a lot of signs point towards Todd Bowles. And even if the loss doesn't point at Todd Bowles, the collateral damage of the loss points at Todd Bowles. So this is a big game for him, but the Buccaneers defense, they are 28th in scoring defense, 31st in total defense, averaging 386 yards per game, 29th in pass defense, 19th in rush defense, averaging 132 yards given up per game. Kevin, I wanted to get your thoughts on a little bit of what more has changed for this Falcons offense. Bijan Robinson and the running back, you said they've kind of had a couple of weeks to fine-tune their run game. I thought the last time these two teams played, the Bucs did a decent job at shutting down Bijan Robinson. He's the kind of player that's going to get his every now and again, but they kind of neutralized him a little bit, I thought, the last time these two teams played. What has changed in that running back room? And, does Bijan have a different role than expected this week in the offense?
I think they will continue to make the run. I think they really want this to be like a 60-40 split, which is close to what they're doing. I think they like the passing game a lot. But I wouldn't be upset if they go to a 55-45 split, some weeks, getting the run game more involved. Because I think they have maybe the best running back tandem in the NFL. And the Bucs, I think, maybe have one of the best 3-headed running back tandems in the NFL out of nowhere. Shout out my boy Sean Tucker, my Syracuse buddy here. But I think Atlanta knows they have a special running back duo, and they'd probably like to use that. You look at the Bucs, and Vita Vea in the middle is such an imposing force, right? I mean, you can't discount that. So the Falcons have been running more inside. You kind of think they're probably not going to lean on that as much going against Vita Vea. I'm sure they'll continue to do stuff with the run game, but mostly just Bijan looks like he's getting more comfortable with the NFL speed. A lot of like rookie running backs, especially guys that are as talented as him, you can tell they just go full on like to the line. They try to make someone miss and then get going. Bijan's finally starting, I think, to slow down a little bit. And you're seeing it with Algier. Algier is the perfect example. He doesn't fly into the line. He kind of just sits back there and waits for that hole to develop. And I think that's kind of what happens with these top running backs is that they're so used to just hitting the hole and going. And in college, they're always going to have a hole. They're at Texas, he was playing behind a great offensive line. In the NFL, the holes sometimes take a while to develop. They don't always show up immediately. Sometimes you have to wait a second before you hit it. And I think Bijan's really starting to learn and grasp that, and I think that's why he's starting to get more carries. And Algier too, he's someone that I think they want Algier to be the finisher for them. They only really have gotten to two that one time against the Panthers. It worked great. They just really pounded that Panthers defense into submission. But yeah, I mean, I think the run game is a core part of what they want to do, and I have a lot of faith in Zach Robinson, who I mentioned it on Thursday. Like every week, he's kind of added something that's been missing from the offense. We've seen the run games worked the first couple weeks and the passing game didn't. So then they sort of started to fix the passing game and add some new wrinkles to that. Then the running game started to stop working. Teams were sitting on the outside zone, so they started to incorporate more inside zone. Kyle Pitts wasn't getting targeted. Then they started getting Kyle Pitts those valuable targets further down the field. So I have a lot of faith in Robinson to kind of get this thing going and keep it going in the right direction. Most of my issues lie on the defensive side of the ball right now because there really hasn't been a lot of adjustments, and that's going to be a key thing in this game. Obviously, the Bucs are shorthanded, but that's still going to be can the Falcons win a bunch of shootouts? So far they've been pretty good at that. And obviously, you probably like Atlanta's chances in a shootout in this game, given the Bucs' lack of weapons. But I still think this is a vulnerable defense, and one of the best ways to keep your defense off the field is to lean on that run game. So maybe that'll be something they try to do.
It's basically whoever's defense plays worse is going to lose the game, pretty much. Like it's whoever. It feels like which defense makes one play. Which defense makes the big sack or the big turnover. What or the big fourth down stop. What's that one play? Which defense is going to make that? Whoever's defense makes that feels like is probably going to win the game.
Yeah, I agree. And Evan wanted to kind of close the conversation with this, but looking at this Buccaneers defense, we talked about how it's a big week for Todd Bowles, but like what has to change? Because this Bucs defense, 2 out of their 3 last games, they have given up 500 yards. That is, I mean, it's not easy to do. Like I feel like every time a defense gives up 500 yards, we certainly hear about it. The Bucs have done it twice in the last 3 games. And again, this is Todd Bowles, who has a reputation to lead a staunch defense, to have a defense who can bend but don't break in certain situations like they've done against the Lions week 2. But when you bend, give up 500 yards, and lose, it's just an awful look. And again, I know the injuries have kind of been a little bit of an issue, but there are certain matchups, there are certain coverages that literally just they have to go. Like there's been weeks where this defense doesn't have an answer for anything. The lack of adjustments are all on Todd Bowles. So adjustments certainly have to be made this week. Where do you think they start to try and stop a little bit of the bleeding here in the middle of the field? Because let's also not forget what Kyle Pitts looked like last time the Bucs played Atlanta here.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of different things that you can do. It's also, I mean, like you can do, we talked about it earlier. You can do scheme things all you want. Like the players sometimes have to play better. I mean, it sounds cliche, but like that's just what it is. Like sometimes like your players just have to execute better, and they're not. And the players that the Buccaneers are relying on executing, right? Like KJ Britt hasn't really worked out. Zion McCollum has been good. The pass rush hasn't really worked out. So like Jordan Whitehead has had his ups and downs. Like there's players that the Buccaneers defense is relying upon, and they're just not really getting the job done right now. So look, the Todd Bowles defense is going to give up a lot of yards because he's going to play a lot of zone. There's going to be a lot of blitzing. And for the most part, when you're bending but not breaking, that's okay. The issue is the last couple of times out, they have broken, right? They have allowed big passing plays down the field, and that's why the zone coverage is there to prevent that, right? Because Todd Bowles does not want to get beat down the field, but it's happened repeatedly. It happened a bunch of times during the Ravens game, and over the middle of the field has just been their biggest weakness. Mark Andrews, that's about on this, I Bleav, the first touchdown. That's about as wide open gets. If you put me in that spot, I probably score the touchdown there. It's just, again, I can talk X's and O's all day long. The players that play better, but it is on Bowles too, because like you said, like he was their defensive coordinator. Like his calling card is defense. So when the defense is really bad, what does that say about him? Now, I do think it's not 100% on him, right? Because again, I said I think the players had to execute, and I don't think they necessarily have the horses, right? Like KJ Britt, maybe not that great. The pass rush needs some upgrades. Even when Jamel Dean was in, he wasn't really playing great. Like they might not have some of the players that they need to be able to be better. But at the same time, Tom Bowles should be able to help that. And the defensive mastermind that he is, you would hope that he'd come up with some sort of solution there to at least stop the bleeding a little bit. And unless you're playing a Spencer Rattler, it doesn't seem like this defense can really have answers to stop anyone. Obviously, Lamar Jackson's Lamar Jackson, and Kirk Cousins has been a good NFL quarterback. But look, it's not going to change, because just like we talked about earlier, you got Kirk Cousins. Next week, you got a guy, I don't know if you know, Patrick Mahomes. He's pretty good, I think. And then Brock Purdy, who Kyle Shanahan has had Todd Bowles' number the entire time Bowles has been in Tampa Bay. So it's going to have to change quick, but it's not going to be easy. And there's a lot of things wrong with this defense, but I tried to simplify it there to sort of wrap up the whole conversation. But they have to be better. And if they're not better, then, this season is going to go down the drain pretty quickly.
Got to lean on the defensive line this week. Got to lean on the interior guys to make plays. We know Vita Vea is a presence. Kalijah Cansey, when he's on the field, he's great. I know it is not ideal to get most of your meaningful pressure from the interior, but they've been doing that. They need to continue to do that. I know Greg Gaines wasn't a walking boot this week, but that seemed to be more of a precautionary thing, so he should be out there. The Bucs just want to try and keep him as healthy as possible, because he is playing a lot more snaps this year than he did last year, so that's a little bit of an adjustment for him, but you need pressure. I don't think there's going to be any scheme changes that Todd Bowles can make that is going to magically shut down Kirk Cousins. I don't think there is a scenario where he comes away from this hitting the under on any of his passing props, to be honest with you. I think, Evan, you agreed with me. I think it's 22.5 completions for Cousins
22.5, yeah.
Easy money.
Smash that over.
Yeah, easy money. Guy completed 40+ against the Bucs last time they played, threw the ball damn near 60 times. So I think his passing yards is like 224 or something like that. I think that,
yeah.
I think that, again, Kirko's going to do his thing, but it's up to the Buccaneers defense to, one, bend but don't break. Two, Evan, as you had mentioned, make that difference-making play. You got a couple of ballers on the field. You got Antoine Winfield Jr. back in the lineup. Yep. You have guys who have the ability to force a takeaway. I think that's going to be the difference in this one. But let's break it down with some score predictions. For Atlanta, while we were talking, the injury report did come out. Looks like inside linebacker Troy Anderson is not going to be available with a knee injury. He's missed a lot of time this year, if I'm not mistaken, for the Falcons. And then Justin Simmons, out of that safety room with a hamstring, is listed as doubtful. Center Ryan Newsel, I think, right? Yeah?
Yeah, the news flash. That's
yeah. Well, he is questionable with a knee injury. Probably expected to play, those big tough guys in the trenches there. But, Kevin, we'll get your score prediction first here. Big-time game for 2 4-3 teams. Looking to take home the division. I know we're still early in the season, not even at the halfway point, but this one feels like it has season-long implications.
Yeah, it does. I think we're gonna get above the over. The over kind of suspiciously low for this one. I think it was like 45.5 or something.
I saw it last night at 46.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that sounds which seems low considering what we saw these teams do last time.
I think it's because of the receiving things, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, I'm still thinking this is going to be like a 31-24 game, something like that. I don't really see these two defenses stopping much. I think the Falcons are on the winning side of that, but this rivalry, it could go either way, and I think it would be, I mean, the Bucs need it the most, obviously. They're going into this section of their schedule where they really can't afford to lose here, but we'll see. We'll have to see how the loss of those receivers, you never really know until you see it, right? Like how big and how drastic that loss will be, but it's typically pretty hard to overcome something like that. So we'll see. The Bucs may have a little bit of an advantage because this will be the first game with those losses. They may be able to roll out something really unusual that might catch the Falcons off guard, which is why I have Atlanta still giving up a good number of points in this one. But I do think Atlanta ultimately ends up getting it done, but tough game.
Just to circle back and correct myself, Greg Gaines is out. I think we said that when we mentioned the players that Todd Bowles had said was out. He was in a walking booth this week. He is out, so he will not be along the defensive line for Tampa Bay. But yeah, I agree. I don't know if I love the over as much because, again, you don't entirely know what this offense is capable of until you see it. It could be tough sledding this first half. It could be, I don't know if it would be 2022 offense kind of bad, but it very well could be if this game gets out of hand. I don't think it gets that bad, especially with the run game being in the good spot that it is now. I think the Bucs are going to keep the Falcons honest early. I think we're going to get the best look at Sean Tucker we've had all season outside of that New Orleans game. And I think the Bucs have shown a lot of resiliency this year, and they're going to have to do it again. It's an uphill battle. They have surprised me early in the season for 2024, and I think they're going to win this game. They know what's at stake. Both of these teams obviously know what's at stake, and I think that this is one of those matchups where second time you're playing this team, we've said it before, it's hard to sweep a team in the NFL, and I think the Bucs, despite the NFC South being the ugly division it has been, they have won it the last couple of years because when they need to, they can win games like this one. So I got Tampa Bay taking it. Ugly game, just like you said, Kevin. I think it'll be a hard-fought game. 21-16. Feels like an awkward score, but it feels right for this week. Feels like it's going to be that kind of game. Evan, what are your thoughts?
You think this defense is holding them to 16 points?
Okay. Oh, man.
I mean,
hey, crazier
he
things.
Explained it well. He explained it well. I mean,
crazy,
the Falcons scored 14 last week. They put up 400 yards and scored 14 points. So sometimes the evil Kirk shows up. So
well, you never know. So this obviously it's a tough game to get a read on, right? Because you just don't know what type of Bucs offense is going to be here. But just like Rhett said, this season and last season, I'm going to point to even more about the resiliency, right? The games that like you just felt, man, the Bucs have to have this one. You're going into Atlanta, the Bucs got to have it, right? The Bucs got to have it. Then they end up winning that game. This year, the game against New Orleans, right? You're like, okay, like that's a big one, right? After a tough loss against Atlanta, Bucs got to have the game. They get it. The Bucs haven't lost 2 in a row yet this year. So they have not lost 2 in a row yet. And I don't know how, but I think they're going to lean on Rachaad White and get the win in the Creamsicles for the first time in like forever. I don't remember the last time they won in the Creamsicles.
I think they beat the Packers. Was it 2000?
Yeah, I think it was Josh Freeman's debut. Yeah, I think it was 2009. That's the last time. Now, I mean, obviously, it's a little bit of deceiving because the Creamsicles went away for a decade, but that's the last time, they had won. So one win, I think, since they brought them back as throwbacks, basically, right? So one win. And actually, one of the losses, I Bleav, was to Atlanta when they wore the Creamsicles. But I think they're going to find a way, and it'll be a Chase McLaughlin last-second field goal to win 27-24. And the Buccaneers win a game that simply they have to have. And if the Buccaneers had won Thursday night a couple weeks ago, the Falcons would be in this situation now where the Falcons would have to have this game. But unfortunately, the Buccaneers are not in that scenario, and they are in a do-or-die situation here. So, and I think, again, when they've had to rise to the occasion, I don't know how, but they're going to somehow make it work with the pieces they have on offense and do just enough to get in position to kick a field goal to win the game.
Big week for the Creamsicle crew. I don't know if you fellas noticed, but I am dripped down to the socks here, courtesy of our friends at Duvin Designs. They collaborated with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers merchandise department, and they released a vintage Creamsicle-inspired collection of merchandise, this hat being one of them, this orange sweater being another. There was a long-sleeve 70s-style polo they had. You can go check out James, our buddy James, Mr. Bucs Nation, his social media channels. He blew it up. He had to do it to him, right? He was looking fly as hell.
He had a stunt on him.
Exactly, man.
It's pretty sick stuff. I just received my package a couple hours ago, so pretty cool stuff. Yeah, very very cool stuff. You guys check them out on the Buccaneers team store. It's now live, so ahead of the game, go ahead, and I believe it's available at Raymond James Stadium too. So if you go to the stadium, you'll be able to purchase it too. You can get that hat like Rhett's. You can get the sweatshirt like Rhett. You can get there's a bunch of different shirts. There's a bunch of different. There's another hat. So yeah, I mean, look at that. That's neat.
Dude.
Yeah, I mean, come on. So yeah, shout out to Duvin Design. Yeah. I mean, look, you got the little thing there. Our audio listeners have no idea what's going on. But yeah, shout out to them. And yeah, it's good. And it's always cool, even though the Bucs usually don't win in them. It's always cool to see the Creamsicles.
Oh man, I don't know if Kevin, I don't know if you run the Falcoholic Twitter, but I had seen someone posted the other day. The Bucs have an all-time record of what is it, 126, something like that, in the Creamsicle uniform. So looking for win 101 this week. It is going to be an intense game. But Kevin Knight, ladies and gentlemen, the host of the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast from the Falcoholic, we appreciate your time this week. I know we took up a bunch of your time. We had you on 2 shows this week, but it's always great hearing your insight, and it's always great working with you because you're a level-headed Falcons fan. You are able to swallow your pride a little bit and go on to another podcast and talk about, honestly, what the problems, what the strengths and weaknesses are with your team. It's a nice cleanse because, respectfully, we've had some guests so far this season who like to come on and be like, yeah, our team doesn't really have any weaknesses. And it makes for a short conversation. But
is that the Saints fan?
No, they know better than that by this point. But Kevin, I can't,
hope so. Yeah.
I can't tell you how much we appreciate your insight, my friend. Good talking to you.
As always, guys, thanks for having me on, and thanks for coming on Dirty Birds and Brews as well. It's one of my favorite collabs we do every year, and we'll keep it going because these two teams aren't going to stop playing each other anytime soon. So we got plenty of opportunity.
Absolutely. Make sure you follow Kevin. I Bleav it is Falcoholic Kevin on Twitter.
Yep.
You got it. And check out the Falcoholic, a part of SB Nation, which Evan, our very own here, writes for the Buccaneers affiliate, bucksnation.com. Before we dive into that, follow our show on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those are Cannon Fire Podcast. Best place to go for updates on the show. And, of course, Tampa Bay Buccaneer news as it happens. Speaking of Bucs news as it happens, you can follow my co-host Evan on Instagram at Bucs_daily. You can also find him on Twitter at EvanNFL and check out his written work at BucsNation.com. What have you got in the hopper this week?
Yeah, gonna have X Factor coming up for the game, so still sort of deciding on it, to be honest with you. But there's a lot of different things you could go with. You can go with the offensive side of the ball, right? Because the absences of Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, or you can go with the defense side of the ball because like somebody on this defense needs to step up. So it will be curious to see who I decide, but tune in to thebucksnation.com probably tomorrow at some point and see who I have be the Buccaneers X Factor for this game. And then, of course, afterwards, I will have the day after reactions on Twitter and all that stuff.
YouTube.com/Cannon Fire Podcast. We will talk to you next Sunday afternoon. Win, lose, or draw. We'll be live on the YouTube channel breaking down Week 8's game between the Bucs and the Falcons. Gotta have it. Both teams gotta have it this week. A lot on the line. A lot of long-term implications. And for Tampa Bay, certainly a lot to prove with a tough test against the Falcons this week. I'm your host, Rhett Matthews, signing off from my co-host, Evan Wanish, and our special guest, Kevin Knight. We'll talk to you Sunday after the game. Until then, and as always, thank you for listening, and go Bucs.